You know, sometimes life doesn't always go the way we expect. And you can't really say that you're always going to have control. Sometimes it's better just to let the reins free. But I say, personally, from what I've noticed, it's better to just live life as it's presented to you and work within those bounds. It's less stressful. There's less need to worry about things. And I know with this hustle culture, you got people worrying about whether they're going to be able to pay their next bills or keep their jobs, or if they'll have enough money to feed themselves or their kids. But anyways, I say all this to say that from what I've noticed these past few months, hanging around people, working jobs, doing what I like to do, and from what I see on social media, I've come to the conclusion that the U.S. is compromised in general as far as personal safety for everybody and security. It doesn't really matter who you are specifically. You don't really have safety unless you have an amass of wealth, unless you have a good accumulation, or if you just so happen to be surrounded by people who can help enable your safety, right? That means profound community, people who have goals, who are life-oriented, who can advocate empathetically with one another. And that doesn't mean necessarily a performance. You don't have to just have the mask, but you do want to have people around you who generally mean well for you as well as themselves, right? And that allows good community in general. But the problem I've noticed is that, well, for the most part, there's an issue with social media. So with TikTok specifically, you get into these feedback loops that stimulate your dopamine, right? You find out what you like to see, and then you follow certain creators, or you stick around and you watch certain things for a while, and then the algorithm shows you more of that, and then you see more things like that in general. And then you might be telling your friends, oh, I've seen this before, right? Or you might speak about it in silence or in privacy, and then you get rerouted back to more of seeing those same things, right? To get that feedback loop. But this is weaponized against you. If you're not careful enough to see or discern how it is coming to you, right? What specific profiles, what they're saying, the context. If you're not seeing how it relates to how you think, how you speak, who you hang around, and where you live, it can reroute to get to finding out how you think mentally, your alignment, and then they can use that to abuse you in real life. And you actually won't be able to figure that out unless you actually decide to try to be more intelligent in general, and you want to learn and figure things out systematically. So you have to learn about things like coercion and then manipulative tactics, right? Especially if you know anything about narcissism, if you've had a narcissistic family at some time in your life, or if you've had a partner who is narcissistic, you can see the tactics for what they are as well. But it's hard to discern if you personally haven't experienced it yourself. So people like me like to come on here just to tell you guys, like, this stuff is real. We're not sitting around looking for excuses to blame others for our situations, but we understand that when it comes down to it, there are things out of your control that are affecting your life. So that's why I say it's best to work within your bounds, work within your situations, work with what you have, work with the money you have, and try to make it yourself despite what's going on, because there's not much you can do about the situation. Personally, if I have to speak on my situation, I started in a narcissistic family. I was the scapegoat, the black sheep. And I didn't know this because the method to get me in that position was first subtle coercion to define which member of the family has the most liability to align with good morals or have empathy in general, right? This kind of stuff is sought after first by the Hoovers, the narcissistic mother and father. And then after that, they use the children as flying monkeys in order to keep the coercion, and then you won't be able to discern whether what's happening to you is systemic or if it's purposefully being done in order to get you into a position to where you don't have much ability to think for yourself and have more reliance on them, right? It's that grooming method that you can't see for what it is unless you learn about it online or somebody can decipher it for you and describe in detail, right? So I was in that position for pretty much my entire childhood. I didn't have any ability to see outside of that because I had to isolate, right? If I didn't isolate myself enough to want to go online and at least see other profiles of people speaking on the same things, if I didn't at least try to go on the internet and learn about coercion and about gaslighting and projecting and trauma dumping and whatnot, I would not be able to know if my situation was dire or not. I wouldn't know if it would have put me in a situation that I probably couldn't get out and see for myself, right? But that's what I had to experience, right? And then this extended on to my community around me. So my parents, as well as my family members, they told my community about what was going on, right? So they got me into an isolated position. They told my community about my mental state, right? In order to make it seem like what I was doing was wrong on my own, right? Because the idea with narcissism is to get the victims to make themselves feel accountable for what they're doing, right? They want to remove themselves from accountability. So what they do is they use your autonomy or whatever you think about, whatever you speak on, the people that you hang around, they weaponize those things against you, and they don't tell you specifically, so that way you have to keep questioning it, right? They want to keep you on this confusion dynamic, so that way you don't understand whether it's your own fault or the fault of others, and that removes their admission directly. You can't tell unless you speak to them. But of course, when it comes to those kind of people, they're not going to show you who they really are. They're going to keep hiding their cards. It's part of narcissism. It's a really coward-like thing to be engaging in if you're somebody who is a flying monkey in certain situations. You don't want to be that anyway, because sure, there are benefits. There can be benefits, right? I believe to every situation there's benefits, whether they're moral or not. But at the end of the day, when you allow yourself to be joined in somebody else's trauma that's being created, you essentially put your agency into something that could harm you, and you don't know that because you have no idea how vast the situation can be. You have no idea if the people that you're allowing yourself to be coerced by and to allow yourself to be a participant in the narrative, you don't know if they're dangerous enough to try to harm you, right? It's based on a transactional thing. But anyways, I was put in that, right? The pit, basically. And I couldn't get out of this pit without at least isolating hard enough to where I wasn't speaking to many people. Because if I did, honestly, I have no idea if I'd be alive. I had to learn so many things in a short amount of time. And if I didn't do that, if I decided that I didn't want to at least discover what was going on, I probably would not be here speaking to you about this today. This would not be as easily maneuverable as it is right now for me. I would not be able to see through it and decipher if it was really being done to me or not. Now, this happened for a good while. This happened for, I would say, the first half of my life. So we're talking, I can't tell which age it started because I don't really remember much about when it began, but it was very early in childhood. So it could have been like maybe 5 years old, or maybe sometime in elementary. but I don't remember. But I do know that everyone around in my reality was part of this smear. It was no good. Like, I could have been killed, seriously. So after a while, when I got to a certain age, right, I would say like 18, I started to see things a bit more clear, but I still didn't know, like, if this was as bad as it is. I didn't know if it was something that was harmful to my life or not. It just seemed like it was normal, right? And that's the kind of thing with narcissists. They don't make it seem like what's going on is as bad as it is, but it is very bad. And you're fighting essentially against their insecurities and their cowardice. So their need to hide their hands goes against you. It goes against themselves, but it goes against you as well, because you can't tell if what they're doing is in an attempt simply to maintain that grooming that they want, or if it's to discard you, and that discard could end up with, your life being taken. But I had to discern that kind of stuff. And, as I got older throughout adulthood, working jobs and whatnot, I started to notice that there were still more and more people kind of behaving in the same way. And I didn't know, like, is this because, is it my personality? Is it because of how I speak? Is it due to the fact that to certain people, I'm not very, like, comforting, I guess. And, this kind of questioning is good for yourself. You want to discern if you're not very comforting to people, or if, some people just don't like the way you operate. With some people, you can't really change their opinion. So it's just, can you change your own environment within your own life to benefit yourself better? And that's kind of how you want to be as a good person, right? You want to be somebody who's trying to be better, not trying to necessarily conform to a mask or to be fake or whatnot. You're just trying to see how you can move the parts in your own life so that way you benefit yourself better, right? That's kind of like looks maxing and joining cultures or learning things or learning to be creative for yourself. You want to learn how to do things for yourself so that way you have, more profound ability for yourself. So that allows you, like, to resonate with a different variety of people rather than who's immediately around you. But that was also weaponized against me. My want to be a better person and be empathetic was also weaponized against me. To get these people around to further themselves or entrench themselves further into the narrative, right? Now, the fact that all of this was going on, I was already telling myself, okay, there has to be a safety concern to some degree, right? If this is allowed to happen and, people that involve themselves choose not to inform at all and choose to instead maintain the narrative simply because it benefits them in that temporary space of time, because mind you, this does not last forever. If you're a flying monkey at all, your narrative probably is not going to last you your entire life, especially if the victim becomes aware. You're likely going to be seen for who you are, and you're probably going to have some sort of karmic justice brought back to you. And that it doesn't have to happen immediately. It does usually occur in later in life for most people, simply because of the system that we live in. But don't think that you're getting away with being a flying monkey. That stuff does come back to you. That shit is not, it's not something that you can just engage in and feel free to think that it doesn't come back. It does. Just be known. But anyways, so I was put in that pit. And throughout life, it got worse, right? It got so bad that they began the financial abuse. It got so bad that they began just straight up projection onto me. If they were to see me, right, or be around me, if I was to be around people who knew who I was and I didn't necessarily know who they were, but they had information and details about my life, they were able to use that against me, right? The manipulation tactics and the triangulating and whatnot. So it got so bad that I was being scapegoated from those jobs. I was being projected against. I was being triangulated in general. I was being gaslit to make it seem like it was my fault. I was being told that nothing's actually happening, that it's just my own mind, right? I was being coerced that way. And then it got me to the point where I said, okay, I have to cut everybody. I can't just keep going and feeling like I'm safe, because if I keep allowing random people to speak to me, it could danger my life, you know what I'm saying? So it got so bad that I had to isolate. And then this made me seek more external advice, because I couldn't go to people around me. They were too dangerous, right? Especially in that sort of in that light. You can't tell what people are saying or what they're doing immediately. So you have to tell yourself, if I want to make it out of this, I have to find out if whether what I'm doing is against my own will or if it's because of other people. So I had to get external advice. I started to go more on social media. I started to look up videos on YouTube and videos on TikTok. And I learned from certain creators that there are names to these types of tactics, right? So, you know, I spoke on some of them earlier, but the idea was that I was being fed to go to social media, to seek advice through social media, because if I didn't do that, I'd probably still be groomed. I'd still be coerced. But I allowed myself to go on social media and, you know, learn from other people. And, you know, it brought light to the situation. And from there, I was able to figure out, okay, as long as I maintain the ability to see through things and try to keep learning and try to keep naming the tactics, naming the coercive methods, naming what people are doing, saying, right? As long as I maintain a memory of everything, I can learn to get out. And eventually I did. So, you know, now I'm here speaking about this because I'm very clear and I have the ability to see through this stuff pretty easily. As a result, I got a lot of gifts. Like my discernment is pretty well entrenched. Like I can see through a lot of people without needing to have much conversation. I can decipher how your thinking is based on the way you speak, the way you act, your bodily functions, right? The way your body language, the way you operate yourself, the way you look. And then I can tell your mood. I can tell what your appearance says about you. I can tell what kind of people you probably hang around and whatnot, and stuff like that. Because if I didn't start to discern stuff like that, I would still be groomed. I'd still probably be rerouted to be in a situation that would be way more harmful than it is now. But I say all that to say that if this is going to happen to one person, and it's arbitrary, right? It doesn't matter the reason for it. And I fully believe the reason is simple envy. The fact that I had that intelligence, the fact that I had that awareness, the fact that I'm conventionally attractive to certain people, and the fact that I didn't really need to learn from too many people. I just had to, you know, learn to discern myself and then get some advice online. But the fact that this can happen to anybody means that the U.S. is compromised in my eyes. If this can happen and it's enabled, right? And this extended to police coercion too. They were allowing this stuff to be developed. They allowed all of the narratives to be shaped, and they said essentially that there is no way you possibly could remove yourself from the situation outside of just completely isolating, no matter what they say, right? And you can't change people's opinions if they decide a certain way about you. But it was police enabled, which means there is some state influence and government influence, which means, yes, the U.S. is compromised in this way. You have to be careful whether who you're hanging around is coercive. You have to be careful whether they're narcissists, whether they're sociopaths, whether they have pathological issues, whether they decide that, you know, the need for individualism can be weaponized against other people to the point that it's evil, to the point that it allows them, even if it might kill somebody, you know what I'm saying? Like they would allow that stuff to happen. So you got to be careful with those kind of people. But, you know, there are many of those, and I had to learn that myself too. I couldn't speak with them because, you know, they're going to probably coerce me, or they're probably going to try to do something to put me in another marginalized position. But I had to figure all this stuff out. So the U.S. is compromised. We can't decide as a collective to allow this stuff and think it would never happen to us. The fact that it is allowed is dangerous. I think this is why you're starting to see people talk about especially a lot of these women, they don't want to have children because it's dangerous to put them in a situation where there's people that like this that exist. We're seeing men also say that they don't want to date much, or if they do, not with kids. We're seeing men say they don't want to marry because of the coercion. And you know, systemically, there's ways to have marriage weaponized against you financially as a man. There are a lot of dynamics within female social groups where they fight amongst each other, right? Because there are a good deal of women who feel like they're not attractive enough on their own, so they feel like they have to fight other attractive women who are just naturally attractive, and then that behavior transgresses onto other people. So the fact they exist is a problem, right? The fact that the same thing happens in men's social groups with attractive men, and the fact that all this stuff can be weaponized and is fully enabled without accountability, right? This means that we're essentially coerced collectively with one another. And if you can't tell who's who, you can be abused, and you have to be careful with that. So, you know, I just say all this to call a warning to the issue that we're seeing today. It's pretty invisible and insidious. This stuff is not like your everyday, you know. It's hard for people to see this as well, and not many get to come or have to come to this degree of it, right? Many just are enablers in the system. Many don't understand the vast degree or the depth because they may not be as attractive, or they may not be as intelligent or as aware as somebody who is in the pit of this, right? You got to be careful. So we come to bring awareness. We're not necessarily trying to seem like we're more superior to people, or that we're better, or that we want to be seen as superior. We just want to speak to our situation because the danger is known, and it's not something that I feel should be happening to anybody regardless of who you are. It doesn't matter you're a man or woman. You shouldn't want this to happen to you or anybody else, right? So, you know, we got to be careful about that stuff. But anyways,